Hi, I'm Corinna Mansfield, and I'm here today to take part in the Canva Librarians and Teachers Fall Showcase. I'm going to talk about my new book, which is Practical Marketing for Your School Library, but I'm going to show you some of the things that I used Canva to help me with when I was creating this book. So, one of the things that I always lean on for Canva is to create flyers that can just market your presence within your school. So, for example, here is a What Can Your Librarian Do For You template. I think I've shared this before on my page, and a lot of people were able to access it with the public link on Canva. But this is just a way to get people to understand that you have a lot to offer. So some of the things I put on here are reading promotion, research support, classroom collaboration, literacy community building, and curriculum support. And this is actually a template that I was able to easily modify on Canva. And there are many, many others that are um, just as good as this one. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is using empathy maps. Empathy maps are a way to get um, an insider understanding of how people are viewing and using your library, especially your students. Sometimes it's really great to have this kind of insight because then you can use that data to change what you're doing in your library and make them feel like they're really part of what's going on there. So you can see here, there's a bunch of different examples of different kinds of empathy maps that I found around the internet. You can really just make a very simple grid with Canva, or you can make one in real life if you want to, on a whiteboard or some other kind of board in your library. You can also hand out printed copies of your empathy map with questions if that's something that you think might be helpful. But an empathy map is a collaborative tool used to gain a deeper understanding of a particular audience or user. Often, this user is employed in design thinking and user experience in the business world. But when we're talking about a school library, we're really talking about our students. So it might help a team of teachers visualize what their users might think, what they feel, say, and do in relation to a specific service, product, or experience. That's how it's really used in the business world. But if you want to apply that to a school library, you might just want to put out a very simple grid. This is another example from the internet. In a few seconds, I'm going to show you the one that I made that I included in my book, Practical Marketing for Your School Library. But every empathy map must have these four components: what people say, what people think, and what people do, and what people feel. So when you're asking people what they say, what would they say about your library? What would they say about what's happening there? What would they think about your library, which is a little bit different than what they would say? And maybe that will give you further insight into how they feel about the library. What do they do when they come to the library? That's often something that we're not 100% sure about how every student is accessing and staying interested in the school library. So asking them what they do when they get to the library is also really important. How do they feel? So this is another level of insight that you could quiz your students about when you're talking about your school library. And once you start putting that information into this grid, you start to get a bigger picture of what's going on. So here is the empathy map that I created for the book. It's very simple, but Canva allows you to do really, really simple things and get much more meaningful and deeper understanding. So here is the empathy map about what people think, see, say and do in the library. And here are a few answers to the questions. One of the categories I changed to hope and believe. So, what do people hope for the library? What do students hope for the library? And some of them said that they hope that there's more fun and interactive activities, that there's new updates to the collection, and a lot of the things that you would normally just imagine a student would want in a school library. But also, there were a couple of insights that were not something that I anticipated, and one of them was that the library seems outdated. So our library isn't even that old, really, but for a student to think that the library seemed outdated, I had to probe more and find out more information about why they thought that. So that's some of the things that you might be able to do when you're looking at your school library. So here is an example of a flyer that you could make with Canva once you have decided to update something about your library or include something. You could put this in your newsletter, or you could put this on your morning announcements, or wherever your school, whatever channels your school uses to get in touch with your students. And here are some other library newsletter ideas that I use Canva for on a regular basis. This is just an example of a newsletter that we did last year. Every year we have a book month at our library, and it's usually called March into Reading or something that's a word play on March. So here is our March into Reading newsletter from 2024. And you can see that we have a welcome address and we have a table of contents in the beginning. And we usually publish our library calendar. That particular year, we had some extra author visits, we had some recycled literary crafts, and we had a few different kinds of read alouds. So we made this calendar that reflected the Chinese read aloud and the other things that we were doing in the library. Here's our author visits page. We had some really lovely authors. There were more than this, but I'm just using this as an example to show you how you can highlight and showcase the things that you're doing in your library and your newsletter. And here is another contest where we were asking students to redesign book covers. This was the book cover redesign challenge, where we asked students to come up with old favorites with new covers. Here is our book month March into Reading short story competition. This particular one was called Growing Pains. We've had a lot over the last few years, but we usually advertise them in the newsletter, and we get a lot of students interested, and they submit through a link in the newsletter. Here's another nonfiction writing contest that we had called Hidden Hong Kong. And we asked students to tell us something that they didn't know about Hong Kong. So maybe some historical fact or a different place, or even one student wrote about a restaurant that they thought we might not know about. And here's our character dress-up day. There were some other things that were going on at that same time during that week, so we listed them all on this activities and events page. And at the same time, March was Women in History Month. So we had a bulletin board that had our Women in History, and we highlighted that on another page in the newsletter. And then we just talked about what's new in the library collection. So this particular book was new to the collection, and we just wrote a little blurb about that book. And then we did an author study where we talked about an author that's very popular in the library. We highlighted and showcased some of the other holdings that we have for this particular author in the library. We actually have a lot more now since that last newsletter. And then we did a little reader's advisory, and that was linked to the Women in History Month. So we did a Celebrate Women in History with us, and we added a few different titles. And then always in my newsletters at the end, I do a recap of what happened the month before. We check up on which students are checking out books. This is from a few years ago, where all of these students were listed as the top 10 readers. And we also gave some little library statistics about how many books were checked out and used in that month, or maybe they were used but not checked out, because we always use our scanner to note which books are being used in the library. And then a few other statistics and a little graph. And that is really what I wanted to show you this time. I just wanted to show you that you can use Canva to do very, very simple things in the library. And if you're interested in more, my book is coming out on November 13th. So if you're interested in that, there's also a flyer here where you can get a discount if you wanted to. But I am happy to answer any questions that people have about marketing in the school library. What I've done is taken Canva really throughout the book to highlight different kinds of analytical business tools that you can apply to a school library setting. So things like a SWOT analysis, or a user journey map, or an empathy map, or even using business techniques such as Kaizen and Kanban boards, and things that I'm sure a lot of you are already using, but I've tried to put them together in different ways to make it very simple and easy for everyone to use. So I hope that highlights something that is going to be interesting to somebody out there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me whenever you can think of what you want to know. Thank you. Bye-bye.